And we are back after 2 weeks off from fantasy golf. My name is Jeff Bergerson. My screen name on daily fantasy sites is JT Bergerson. As always, I'm joined by Zach Turcotte, aka Mysteriously on those sites. And it's been a long 2 weeks, Zachary.
How was your off season? Did you get down to the Caribbean for a while?
Right.
Take some time away?
I got more emails from people who were in convulsions, just thirsting for some action, and they had none of it because the President's Cup was, it was all right, but it just didn't quite do it for people without some DFS action.
You weren't playing the new esports tournaments that they've got going on where you can bet on guys who play video games over in Japan?
I haven't got into that yet. Have you?
Okay. Now, the algorithm that I'm working on isn't quite complete, so I don't want to get in until our new stats guy has it completely optimized for us, so I'm hanging back for now.
Nice. So everybody, rest assured, we're back in full effect now. For those of you who are new to us, first thing you need to do, go on to fantasygolfinsider.com, become a premium member. That will solve all your life problems. Next, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's that little button right below this video right here. Click subscribe and follow us. And pretty much go crush all your DFS games, cash games, GPPs, and read our stuff, and we do good work. So welcome aboard. I think before we get into previewing this week's event, which is the Fries.com, Zachary, should we just get going on the shot of the week?
I'm ready. Give me some space.
This is a real special shot of the week for all of you. I know it's a lot of your favorite segments we hear about. Yeah. We hear your feedback every week. So this one's a real special one. This is a President's Cup edition. Some of you were watching it, some of you weren't.
We were up until 2 a.m. that night watching live as this is taking place over in South Korea because we're just that dedicated in terms of taking in as much golf as we can.
I'm still a little bit confused, and maybe some of you will remember this. It was Phil Mickelson paired with Zach Johnson versus Jason Day, Adam Scott. Correct me if I get one of these facts
Sounds
wrong.
Right.
Okay, so they're playing, and the match is all square. And actually, you know what? Here. All right, now I can actually read this. So, match is all square. They come to the 7th tee. Phil Mickelson, for some reason, I think he wanted more length, switches the model of his Callaway ball, right?
Yep.
Tees off. Then he inquires after he's teed off with Captain Jay Haas. He says, well, could I switch model balls, right? And Jay Haas says, I don't think so,
and
right?
There's confusion on that because in the Ryder Cup, apparently, this is allowed.
Okay.
So in the Ryder Cup, this is okay. In the President's Cup, not so much.
So they inquire with the on-course rules official, and he obviously couldn't make a determination either, so he calls the rules committee. The rules committee determines that Phil Mickelson is DQ'd from the hole. So Phil Mickelson picks up his ball, doesn't finish the hole, and they end up losing the hole. So they go up to the next tee, and they're informed that that they're down 2 now rather than just down 1 because there's a penalty for that in addition to them saying you had to forfeit the hole. So according to the statement from the rules committee, it says the penalty for breach of one ball rule is a 1-hole adjustment to the state of the match. Okay? So this means that at the conclusion of the 7th hole, the state of the match is adjusted by 1 hole. Mickelson could have continued playing in order to win or have the hole. Instead, they're down. They're down 2 rather than 1. All right? So I don't know. My take is if the players don't know, the captains don't know, the on-course official doesn't know, and the rules committee doesn't know, I think the rule's a little tough.
Well, it creates some issues too because, I mean, a lot of times if a team is already up 2 holes after the 17th hole, they don't play the 18th hole when, you know, the reality now is apparently you can lose 2 holes on 1, so it seemed really strange watching it, and it was a pretty crucial moment because the match ended up being halved. So the U.S. really should have ended up winning that one, as they should have in a number of other matches. I was pretty surprised at how close the event actually ended up being. After the first night, as we were watching it, the U.S. got up 4-1 right away. It looked like they were just going to be on cruise control for the whole weekend, and then day 2 came along, and it just completely went the other direction. came undone. They lost a couple of them right at the end on 18 where they should have won, and they ended up having or losing. So it was fun to watch. It was not the greatest golf I think any of us have ever seen. You had to kind of cover your eyes quite a bit, but overall, I let myself get invested into it because it was really the only thing I had to watch on Thursday night at 2 a.m. So all in all, not a bad little event that they had. So hopefully the U.S. will be able to keep the momentum going next year when the Ryder Cup comes up here to Minnesota.
I'm anxious just to get back to regular terrible shots because these rules for shots of the week make my head hurt, and it's just too much. I just want bad shots, bad holes played.
I think we're going to get plenty of that here in the fall season, so I don't think you're going to have to wait too long.
So, without further ado, let's preview this week's tournament. Like I mentioned, it's the Fries.com. Surprisingly, it's a really strong field, and it's exciting. You wouldn't think that the first tournament of the year would have a stacked field. Pretty good players, guys coming over even from the President's Cup.
Yeah, kind of amazed, like top-level guys from the President's Cup coming over this
Coming
week.
over to bounce back, so that's cool. Field is awesome. Go back to a cut line sweat on Friday afternoon. How good is that?
Well, it's good and bad.
Well, it's a sweat.
It's going to be... It's exciting to anticipate right now. Once Friday gets here, I'm sure I'll be laying over there on that table, counting my number of teams with 6 players that actually make it through. So.
And we're going to start doing something on the cut line coming up here. We haven't decided exactly what, but we're going to do something with that because that is the most fun in all of DFS is the cut line. So this week, the host to the Fries.com is Silverado Country Club in Napa. Keep in mind when you're looking at tournament history that last year was the first year that it was held at Silverado. So focus on last year, not any time before that. There might be something here or there with it being early in the season, but for the most part, let's look at last year. Silverado is a par 72, 7,200 yard course, so not super long. But we've seen long hitters thrive on the course, mostly because they have some short par 4s and long par 5s. So if you look at the standings last year, you see some long hitters. Sang Moon Bai won it. Brooks Koepka was up there. Bowditch was up there. Finau was up there. Matsuyama. So you're seeing the long ball hitters really play well. The stats we're going to be looking at this week: strokes gained tee to green, greens in regulation, par 4 scoring, par 5 scoring, and birdies are better, and then strokes gained putting. It's a little bit easier putting than a lot of places, so it's more forgiving on guys, so keep that in mind when you're looking at, off the top of my head, like a Koepka.
What kind of grass was it again?
Yeah.
There's a big Twitter debate on that. What was it again?
I can't remember. I can't take
a...
a side. That was quite a Twitter battle between what grass was played. But
Yeah, it was fun.
So putting, Koepka, Webb Simpson, Russell Knox, those guys won't be penalized as badly for their horrific putting inside 10 feet. So keep that in mind. Any other strategy that you're looking for utilizing this week, Zachary?
Yeah, don't just jump in. I know you're excited. It's only been a couple of weeks. You've been missing golf. You want to get back into the mix, but don't come back right into this and start throwing in your regular bankroll amount. I would tread pretty lightly here these 5 weeks. Use this primarily as time to accumulate for 2016. Get to know a lot of these players. You're going to see a ton of new players coming over from the web.com tour. You're going to see a lot of the younger guys that are out there, and you're going to see a little weaker field. This field is stronger than what it would normally be, but I think throughout the fall, the fields are not going to be as strong outside of the WGC. So I would say take your bankroll down in terms of its exposure. Start out with maybe 40% of what you usually play, if even that. That would be on the high end. See who comes out hot this first week. Start looking at some of these guys and how they acclimate to making that leap from the web up to the PGA Tour, because a lot of these guys are going to come in and they're not going to miss a beat, because as far as the web.com, they really haven't had. I mean, they had 2 weeks ago, I think they had their championship event, so it's not really all that much time off. So most of these guys are going to come in playing reasonably well, but you want to see who transitions, who can make that leap once the pressure gets amped up a little bit. Now that they've earned their position, some of these guys are going to take off. And that's what you're gonna want to know once we get into 2016 is which of these guys really excelled. Last year, a guy who really took off was Robert Streb.
Right.
Just kind of jumped out of the gates and ran throughout the season and had a couple of little lulls, but overall played really well. So use this time to really dig into seeing which players are emerging towards next year. It tighten up your bankroll as far as the exposure goes.
And it might take a couple of events for these guys to emerge, because last year, if my memory serves me correct, I think Daniel Berger missed the first 2 cuts in the events that he played.
Yeah,
Justin Thomas
accurate.
missed the first 1 or 2 cuts as well. So maybe the first couple of weeks scale it back a little bit. But then after that, I'm fine going my 15% bankroll, because I think the fields are going to not be as strong. I think there's new players to golf coming in from football. So I think that gives us a little bit more of an edge.
I'm hoping. It would be interesting to see, though. This week, DraftKings kind of pulled the rug out from underneath us. We're doing the webcast a day later because the prices didn't come down until the middle of last night.
Right.
So everything got pushed back. So I'm very curious, and I would watch real close this week to see how the contests do.
Yep, let's check out and see if there's any overlays in the contests on DraftKings. Wake up early. And I'll shoot out an email to you. I always keep you updated on stuff like that. So if there's a big time overlay, I'll get an email out and make sure we're taking advantage of it. One thing that I notice, Zachary, is the new guys on the tour who have been playing well in the web.com playoffs. I focused on them, 10 sleepers. Check out the article if you haven't on the website.
Really good article, yeah.
Their prices are higher than I expected.
No real discount at all on some of these guys.
Right. I mean, just a few off the top of my head. Emiliano Grillo, great player. A lot of people know of him, but a lot of people don't know of him yet. He played 5 events last year, so the real guys who know what they're doing.
Wrote him up a couple of times.
Right. Right. But he's the 11th highest priced guy in a pretty solid field this week, and he's at $8,800.
So above the average salary right off the bat.
Right,
so.
and like $800 more than proven guys like Russell Knox or Brandon Todd, guys who are probably going to make the cut. And we don't really know what Grillo is going to do. We know he's a real talented player, but let's see if he's going to be able to outproduce that price. Another guy is like Jamie Lovemark, who I highlighted in that article, real promising. I like him a lot. And then I open up the pricing.
$7,500.
Yeah, he's $7,500. I'm like, whoa! I wanted him at $6,500.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a guy like Lovemark, and he's at $7,500. Then you look down the list, and you see a guy like Hudson Swafford, who finished the season really strong, and he's at $6,900.
Yep.
And I like Lovemark in the fact that there's not as much name recognition there.
Yep.
But then you look at a guy like Swafford's game, which really is pretty well suited for the course this week. It's hard to justify going up to Lovemark other than just you're hoping that he's not as widely owned among the field. But that's another thing that's going to be interesting this year. I think in previous years people didn't pay quite as close of attention to the guys coming out of the web.com tour. They weren't aware of these guys. It was just hardcore guys who were just wanted some action, so they were throwing a little bit of money at golf. And I think this year with the number of sites that are out there and the amount of coverage that golf is getting, it's going to be real interesting. I have a feeling that a lot of these top guys, if you look at Grillo, if you look at Lovemark, Patton Kizzire, once he plays, I don't know why he's not playing this week, but I'm sure he'll be out within the next couple of weeks, who was the winner overall, the champion for the web.com in terms of the points. But when you see these guys, I have a feeling this year will be the first year what people are ready for these guys. So watch really closely on ownership percentage these first couple of weeks and see if other people are picking up on the trends right away. I know they are going to be at the higher levels. I know at the higher dollar buy-ins, guys are going to be on this stuff right away. But look at that, the $2, $5, $10 buy-ins, and just look to see if some of these web players are as widely owned.
The one thing, I was on Pat Mayo and I talked to him a little bit about the one thing that we could have going for us because of those guys being at a higher price is that people will shy away from them. Even if they are aware of them, they won't perceive the value and stay away from them, which will keep their ownership down from the people who do know about them. So that might be helpful in GPPs. Now, cash games, if the value is not there, But GPPs, if we're looking for low ownership, that might present an opportunity for us. So
Yeah, absolutely.
why don't you give me a name at the top that you're kind of targeting this week? Who you like?
Well, there's this kid from Ireland who's coming over. His name is McElroy.
McElroy?
Yeah, I think he's. I can't believe that Rory is actually playing in this event when they announced the field. Yeah, and I suppose that if I followed him a little closer, I would have seen some inkling of it along the way. But boy, he must just be dying to get back into the groove and start early this year, because typically you wouldn't see Rory at all in the fall, maybe once at the most, but generally I wouldn't think we'd even see him till the WGC.
Do you think he's slightly irritated that he's kind of lost the spotlight?
I think so. Well, I think so, and you can't really just play 15 events each year and hope to take back that number one spot. Now that Spieth has kind of entrenched himself up there, so I think he's on a bit of a mission this year, and which is why even with a tournament like this where some of the bigger name pros might kick it in a little bit normally, I think Rory is on his way. He wants to accumulate points immediately. He wants that. None of those guys, not Jason Day, McElroy, Spieth, none of them are going to say it publicly, but all of them want that number one spot.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
They all
have egos. And I've gotten this question a few times this week. Are these guys motivated, or are they just going to go through the motions? If they're playing in the Fries.com,
they're motivated.
They're motivated. They're playing for a reason. So
I mean, if Matsuyama's flying back from South Korea to
I think you got to go this way. The other way. There you go. No, that way. Back around.
Depends on how you're oriented as we're looking. Yeah. So if he's flying back from Korea this week to play in this event, I mean, he could take this week off and play the week after that. I mean, he can just go play in Sanderson Farms or whatnot. There's plenty of other small events that are coming. But he wanted to make the trip back to play in this event. I think that you see some of the names there, they have a little bit of unfinished business.
Yep.
Look at a guy like Brooks Koepka, a couple of names down. A guy who was, you could say, snubbed for the President's Cup. He really could have been one of the last picks to be on the team, I would think.
He could have helped his cause a little bit toward the end of the season.
Yeah, down the stretch. I think the meltdowns hurt him. I mean,
absolutely.
Witnessing those meltdowns firsthand.
No question.
And I'm sure this got back to Jay Haas as he was looking over his final selections, but he was really in line to be that 8 or 9 guy going over there. And he ended up really not even being considered. Even after Furyk came out and had the injury, he still wasn't considered as a replacement. And I did like what I saw out of him
at Alfred Dunhill.
Yeah, exactly. Went over there, had a second place finish.
Yep.
Made a nice charge over the weekend, and I think that sets him up nicely coming back into the season, because he's disgusted obviously with his finish. I can't imagine he liked it at all. And we saw from the number of times that he slammed his club into his bag that he certainly wasn't happy with it. So I think he's a guy who's going to come out really motivated. I think this course suits his game really well. He's a guy who can hit it a mile off the tee. He generally putts it pretty well. And I don't think the pressure is really going to be on him this weekend to perform the way it was down the stretch. So I think he's a guy who we should see make a nice run to start this week. So
I like Justin Rose this week a lot. All of his statistics line up well with the course. His current form is outstanding. He hasn't done worse than the top 16 since like May. So that's pretty crazy. So he's playing well. I like him a lot at the top. Dropped down a little bit, Daniel Berger obviously has gotten back to the form that we saw early in the season before his summer girlfriend,
summer fling,
whatever it was. So
Yeah.
I like Berger a lot this week. And then dropped down a little bit. Another guy who I like at 8,300 this week, Brendan Steele. Any interest in him this week?
Yeah, he's a guy who started off great last season. I think he made his first 10 or 11 cuts in a row as he came out blazing. He's another guy who's a really solid tee to green player. He plays the par fives pretty well. Had a bit of a stretch where he missed a bunch of cuts, kind of went in that make miss, and we were a little bit off of him for a while. But again, it's the start of the season. I think his tee to green game lines up pretty well.
And he's long off the tee, which I like here. He showed up last year, took 21st. So I like him a lot this week. I like that middle range, Brendan Steele. I like Kevin Chapo, who I think for 8,200 is going to make the cut. He's going to take a top 25. And if you structure a team around that middle core, Russell Knox at 79 looks like a pretty good deal as well.
Another guy that I'm looking at down there who just got back from the President's Cup as well, Stephen Bowditch.
Yep.
He took, I think, second last year at the tournament.
Yep,
He's another guy who's got a lot of distance off the tee. He putts the ball pretty well. He's a good scrambler. Tee to green game, okay, but he kind of makes up for it with the scrambling with his putting game. A little bit erratic. I don't like him as much for cash because he could take second or he could miss the cut. So in that regard, I don't necessarily trust him to have a high finish with the cash game. But for his price at $8,200, it's slightly below the average salary for a guy who's basically top. Well, not in the world, but I guess in the President's Cup side, top 10 internationally, excluding Europe. So.
He took 12th in the Tour Championship, 13th at Barclays. So he finished the season strong, looked fine at the President's Cup in the events that he played. He didn't play all of them, but. Dropping down a level, any guys stand out to you in the low 7s or even 6 range that we like this week?
Well, a guy coming back right in that middle range who was real popular down the stretch for players is Will Wilcox.
Statistical monster.
Yeah. I mean, before slamming his knee in the door before the Deutsche Bank and having
How do you slam your knee so hard?
That sounded to me like one of those injuries where you don't really want to admit what happened. Because, I mean, what... How logistically are you putting your knee here, slam the door? I mean, I don't even know how that happens. So it sounds like one of those things where I don't know. It just doesn't. It sounded like a funny story to me. But he's back now. He's healthy. He's in the mix. He loves DraftKings, as we've seen him tweet out before.
$7,500. That's really cheap.
It's a good price for him, and I think players will still be on him to some degree, but I think he burned people 2, 3, or 4 different times on Friday. He's always going to be that guy on cut day who is one above, one below, and he's going to be fighting all the way down the stretch. If he gets through the cut, he's going to move on Saturday, he's going to move on Sunday. He's going to put himself into a much better position. But he is a guy who's going to keep your heart racing. But again, statistical monster. I mean, he really lines up well in almost every category. We look for him to take a step forward this year. So I do like him. You look down the list a little bit. Sean Stephanie at $7,100. That's, I think, a pretty nice price for him. If you look at Lovemark, who's up at $7,500, and then you got a veteran in Stephanie down at $7,100.
Right, I know.
You get a little bit of value right there too, and then Hudson Swafford. There's another guy that we had also discussed. His game was off and on a little bit in the late summer months, but he showed up pretty well in the playoffs and put together a couple of nice events in the FedEx Cup. So he's another guy at $6,900. I don't think you can lose with him. And I know Roger Casey was really big on him this week. That was his building block for our ESPN piece. So I think that's another guy that I like.
Roger's also really high on Ollie as well this week too. So
yeah, and it's a similar style of game. It's a guy who hits it long and putts well. It seems like a lot of these guys who come out of college here in the U.S., they have a similar style of game. If it's Justin Thomas, if it's Berger, if it's Swafford, if it's Ollie, they're all pretty big off the tee, and they all putt it pretty well overall. It's I guess Berger and Thomas falter a little bit, but generally these guys have pretty good tee to green games overall, and they hit it pretty well off the tee. So those are all guys that are a pretty nice value.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, is there anybody kind of down there near the basement that you're
I'm going to throw out a few names for you.
Got a couple of Pat Mayo specials for us?
I do. Well, first of all, I want to say I like coming into the season, Chez Rivet, if you will. You like that? Rivet?
I'm going to go with Rivet.
Rivet, whatever. It's Chez. I like him. He's at $7,800. I like his prospects. He was red hot in the Web.com playoffs. He had a T20, T10 runner-up, and a win.
You got to catch him when he's hot. You got to catch him when he's hot, because when he's cold, he's going to miss 3-4 cuts in a row. He's going to be right up there for 3-4 weeks, and then he's going to struggle.
Another one of those guys, there's not a real discount on price, but in GPPs, I think he could do something. Did you say Bryce Mulder at 75? He interests me as well at 75.
I didn't mention him yet, but yeah.
Well, I'm mentioning him.
Okay. He's yours, man.
Then we'll drop down to the 5s.
All right.
The lonely 5s.
This is where the real gold is at, right?
This is it, yeah. So your ultimate stars and scrubs, you could do Rory McIlroy and Justin Rose, stack them, and come up with Martin Pillar and Rain Gibson. Both off the Web.com tour, playing really well, got some momentum.
Pillar I think Pillar's been struggling a little bit. He went through a stretch in the middle towards the July-August timeframe where he was playing fantastic. The playoffs were little bit of a mixed bag for him.
Yep, I think he's got the talent to break through, though. So a guy in the 5s, I think he could do some damage. Probably not shove all in on him week 1. Let's see how he looks. But a couple of names to kind of monitor in the fall. Anyone else that you want to mention that's
well, there's a
intriguing?
couple of names down there at the bottom that you can take a flyer on if you want to look at a guy like Smiley Kaufman. He's been a guy who people have been talking about here for a while, so I think we'll wait and see. That's one that you're not going to be all in on him this week, but if you take him on a couple of GPP teams, some of your lower buy-in teams, I think he's a guy who has the potential to outperform. At his price there at 5,300, you know, if he makes the cut, he pays off.
Right. Oh,
so,
yeah, absolutely.
You know, he looks at that, and then just for our buddy Glenn Shorney, he is a monster Pete Malnati fan from St. He performed very well at St. Jude and back in 2014 for Glenn. So I know Glenn's been talking that guy up for months. Didn't really play all that great.
No, he's missed some cuts consecutively.
Couple of months,
but if Glenn's on him, Glenn is a good DFS player.
He's pretty solid. So
he's a friend of us.
At 5,200, that does give you a lot of cap room, and you're going to start seeing him on the tour. He does have his card for the year. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there's another guy at 5,200 that's really bottom of the barrel. I wouldn't be that excited about him, but he's another guy that if you're really looking to stack at the top, that's what I would do. And you know, and really for GPPs, that's what one of the things in our research has uncovered for us is that going with a balanced style really hasn't worked in terms of giving you a lot of success on GPPs.
In the big fields.
Yeah, yep. When we've looked at those over the last couple months in terms of seeing who has won these types of events, it's very rarely guys who are picking teams within that 8,000 to 9,000, picking every player right in that range. It's almost always been stars and scrubs. Mm-hmm. We've been really surprised. We thought maybe this sort of alternates between events. It really doesn't. It's really been stars and scrubs as far as the way to go. So throughout this season, open it up a little bit. Really focus on trying to build those teams where you are a little more top heavy and you're taking a little bit more risk at the bottom. That is if you're going for the first place prize. I mean, if you're just looking to cash, it's fine. You can be a more balanced team. But in order to really get that top prize, and that's really the only way that playing GPPs is ever profitable, I would advocate seriously going to more of like an 80 to 90% stars and scrubs type of philosophy, just from what we've seen with the numbers. And that's actually a piece that I'm working on that we're going to have available only in December. We're going to analyze a lot of the lineups that won big events over the last year and give you a real breakdown of what ownership looked like and who the key players were to own in order to give people success as far as winning those big GPP events.
And you touched on a key point, is that ownership percentage and identifying who are the lower owned guys. We have a tool that we're working on right now. We're going to be rolling it out probably next week on ownership percentage, and we're going to put a prediction of what we think it's going to be in the events. It's going to be interactive, so you can put what you think they are and combine them with our predictions for the GPPs. Super important in those fields to know. You know, you can't win with a balanced team. You can't win with 6 guys who are at 20% owned either. You're just not going to win a 150,000 player event. So that's all I got, Zachary. What else do you have to add?
I think that's it. Give a shout out to all of our Cub fans. I know the Dinkmeyer family is in tears tonight after they knocked off the Cardinals. So go Cubs. Hopefully they continue on with their success. Being Viking fans over here, we understand the pain that all of you Cubby fans are going through. So enjoy this little run while it lasts.
My tournament preview is up. Zach's will be up. Daily Spin, look for that. Roger Casey's is up on Fantasy Aces. If you haven't checked out Roger's article, he does a really nice job on that. If you haven't checked out Fantasy Aces, go check them out. We're winning in cash games. We heard from a lot of members who are winning in cash games. Be sure to click through the link on our site to get there. There's money to be won there. As I mentioned earlier, subscribe to our YouTube channel, email us, hit Zach up on Twitter. You gonna do Periscope on Wednesday night?
Yeah, I'll probably be a walking zombie after tonight and then into tomorrow. But
all right.
Periscope probably around 9 o'clock or so tomorrow night.
Okay, so check Zach out on Periscope. Otherwise, let's do it. Let's get back into this. I'm excited.
Cheers, new season,
all right,
buddy.
Sir.
Let's get it done.
Here we go.
Yep.
Everybody, good luck, and we'll talk to you next week.
Good luck.